You are listening to the Prosperous Law Podcast. Learn how to reduce stress, have more time, and make more money. Come on in.
I'm Greg McCollum, and I built a 7-figure criminal defense law firm. I formed Prosperous Law to show criminal defense law firm owners who are desperate for success how to grow from under $200,000 to $1 million and beyond. Hi, this is Greg McCollum back with another edition of the Prosperous Law Podcast. Thanks for joining me. Today's topic, the thing that I'd like to talk about is, are you willing to do what it takes to succeed? It's an interesting question. It doesn't seem like it at first. And there's also this whole concept, the zebra story, basically, which is that people really don't want to succeed. And there are several reasons for that. And it seems counterintuitive that you would say, well, Greg, people want to succeed. People want to be a success. What people really want is to not fail. And not failing is different, at least in people's minds, than succeeding. Because the problem with success is that you put yourself out there, you're more visible, you're exposed, more people are looking at you. The more successful you are, the more criticism you get. And so the zebra story, if you haven't heard it, is that the scientists were studying the zebras and they couldn't tell the zebras apart, that's the whole point of the zebra camouflage, is because predators need to pick out a certain animal to attack. And so with the zebras looking all the same and blending in, then they're hard to attack because it's hard to pick one out. And so the researchers, what they did, the scientists, is they painted or stuck a red spot on a zebra. That way they could focus on that zebra and see it in the herd and then study it and follow it. But the problem was the lions could pick it out too, and then the lions killed it. And so that's the problem for us. That's the problem in your subconscious, is that you do not want to be the zebra with the red spot. You want to be the zebra that's in the herd. You want to be unobtrusive. You don't want to stand out. And for a business to succeed, you need a brand, you need to be visible, you need to be recognizable, and you need to stand out. And so this is a problem. It's something to overcome. I remember years ago when I had my law practice and I was ordering business cards. And so, I knew I had to have my name on the business card and my name and address and phone number and that sort of thing. And I remember the person, the printer or whoever was doing the business card for me, said, you should put your photograph on the business card. And I did not want to do it. And I think at that time I didn't do it because I wanted to be known and I wanted to be a go-to criminal defense lawyer, but I didn't want to stand out. I did not want to be famous. And even when I rebranded my law firm from, it was a terrible name, really, M. Gregory McCollum, attorney at law. That's who I was. And I thought that sounded good. But anyway, I did that for a number of years, and I had some success. But then when I was going to change that, because the idea is I was going to build a law firm that was a business. In other words, I could build a law firm that I could sell. That doesn't mean I want to sell it, and it doesn't mean that I would sell it or even had the intention of selling it. So I had to make the choice in the brand between Complete Legal Defense Team or Greg McCollum Complete Legal Defense Team. And then there again, I wanted to be invisible. I did not want to be Greg McCollum Complete Legal Defense Team. I wanted to be Complete Legal Defense Team, and I wanted to be in the background. I wanted to own the firm and manage the firm, but not be out front, not be the person who was out front. And the people that were working with me then, and the vendors and people that I was taking advice from, they said, "Here's the problem, Greg. You've got all this credibility online. You've been in you've been in the news. You've been on television. You've been in newspapers. There are articles written about you. There's some marketing and things that you've done. And so if we search Greg McCollum, attorney, I think at the time, it got something like, there was like 22,000 hits for Google. And if you searched complete legal defense team, there was nothing. And so the answer there was obvious, is that I had to put my name on it. At least I thought I did. And the idea was that I would change it over time and kind of start to make my name disappear over a number of years. And to some extent, that's what I've done. I did go back where the registration for the business, I had put Greg McCollum Complete Legal Defense Team, and I did go back and go into the resolution and change that so it's Complete Legal Defense Team, basically LLC, not Greg McCollum. My name's not in it. I'm listed as the owner of it, or the person that created it, and that sort of thing. So this is a thing that people encounter, and it's not even necessarily it's not even necessarily a conscious thought. And now, ironically, if you Google Greg McCollum attorney, then a lot of images come up, and I've been photographed a lot. I've put my image out there. I also put my team's images out there, but I'm all over the place. Okay, and so if you look at my marketing, and I have this little short television show that I run, and we run commercials, and I'm on the commercials. And when I go to Walgreens, and the guy that's behind the counter looks at me and says, "Hey, you're the lawyer, right?" And I go to other places, and people say, "Oh, yeah, I know you," or "Where do I know you from?" That has two effects on me. One effect it has on me is that I'm glad somebody's noticing, because I spend a lot of time and money on this stuff. And so if somebody says, "You're the lawyer, right?" then at least some kind of message has gotten through, where at least there's some people out there that if they need a criminal defense lawyer and they like my brand, there's a chance that they'll call. But at the same time, I still feel uncomfortable with it, because I want to be successful but not famous. I don't want to be famous. I never wanted to be famous. But it comes with the territory, and you have to decide. There's certain choices you can make, certainly. And I'm not saying that you couldn't brand a firm and be completely invisible. I think that you could. But like in my situation, I had so much invested in it already. Now, when I started my law practice, I was 33 or 34. And so if I had made a decision back then that I was going to be Complete Legal Defense Team, and that's all that I did to market that, I think that would probably work. I know another lawyer in town that when he came to town and he had a big billboard campaign, he just put the name of the firm up there. And so he's probably done it successfully, and people that know him know that that's the name of the firm. So I'm not saying it cannot be done, but I'm talking about, the zebra phenomenon and success versus not wanting to fail. So the other thing I would like to talk about here is that, growing a business, growing a law firm, and finding success, what is that? And I don't mean in terms of whether you want, less stress or more free time or more money. I'm not talking about that part of it. I'm talking about growing something which involves spending money and making money and growing. So, excuse me. So, the money, whether you like money or dislike money, it's necessary, and it's the easiest way to measure how a business is doing. It's the easiest way to measure how you're growing and how you're propelling yourself forward. So, in terms of the metrics and the numbers, you can say, well, I want to grow my firm from representing 100 people a year, 100 people per year to 200 people per year, or I want to go from 2 employees to 5 employees, or I want to go from 4 employees to 12 employees. And those are measurements too. It's just the easiest thing is just to look at the revenue, because the revenue is going to drive that. You can't go out and hire 12 people if you don't have the revenue to support it. And so the revenue is a crucial number. So building a business is really not complicated. Growing your law firm and turning it into something bigger and more powerful is really, it's not a magic formula. It's really kind of a basic, almost boring formula. The other part of that is that the things that you need to do are fairly mechanical. In other words, there's success is a formula and a path, and you follow the steps, you get on the path, you have a destination in mind, and you start moving toward that. And that part, especially when you look back at it, that part is not brilliant, it's not complex. These are just basic business principles. These are things that all people that have a well-run business, all CEOs of major corporations, everybody knows this. It's common knowledge, the 6 parts of a business and that sort of thing. So where does the difficulty come in? Because if you look at 93% of people that work in the United States do not own a business. 93% do not own a business. 7% of people own a business. And there are people that have a lot of sidelines and side hustles. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a business defined as something, an entity that pays wages to employees. So that's a business in the sense that I'm using it. If you have a sideline where you're selling something on the internet, or you maybe have a separate LLC because you're driving an Uber, or you're selling things online, or you have where you do flower arranging for people, or maybe you do catering on the side. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a business defined as something where you have people on payroll. You're regularly paying wages. So that's only 7% of people. And the numbers may vary a little bit, but that's what I've found when I've looked. So the reason for that is because, at least in my opinion, is because it's so difficult. So that's the paradox. How is it both difficult and hard? The hard part, the really hard part, isn't what you need to do and how to do it. The really hard part is your mindset and your beliefs, and your mindset of doing what you have to do. And there's this fear, almost irrational fear of failure, that blocks most people. And it's something that, even though I've grown this business a lot, and we continue to grow, it's still out there. It's not something that I can completely get rid of. I can't completely get rid of my irrational fears. And I don't think there's really anybody out there that can. I know that I've heard John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan speak a number of times, as somebody I have a lot of respect for. and in terms of what he's done. And I think a lot of people hate him, hate his law firm. They're jealous and envious, and they think whatever they think. But that's not my impression of him. And I don't think he has a bad law firm. I think they go to court, they fight, they're in trial. I think it's a good law firm. But I was listening to him speak one time, and he said that he still has nightmares and is still afraid of going broke. So he still has those fears. He has the same fears, I think, that I do, which is really incredible when you think about it. And I think that it probably applies to most successful people. By successful, I mean very successful, up to like the billionaire class. I think that they have the same fears that you have. They have the same fears that I have. So part of the way I learned to manage this is just to become aware of what's going on in my subconscious mind, so that when it rises up, when it creeps up, I at least know what is happening, and I don't let fear throw me into chaos and confusion, which is what it does. And this is something that I've worked through and worked on for really about a decade now. When I first started learning about it, is that the way your subconscious fear stops you is to literally confuse you, and you become emotional, and then the whole point of that is just to stop and to go back to safety. And it's interesting too, when a lot of people, start a business because they want to have freedom, or they think they're working too hard, or they think they're working, too hard for somebody else, and they would rather set their own hours, make their own decisions. And as a law firm, if lawyers are working hard on something that they don't like, a subject matter they don't like, they think, well, if I own my own law firm, I could just take the cases that I like. And that kind of reminds me of somebody had told me, I think it was a friend of mine, had said that he was 17 or 18 years old, and he joined the Marine Corps because he didn't want anybody telling him what to do. So he joins the Marine Corps because he doesn't want anybody telling him what to do, okay? So let that sink in. So the person that opens a business, because the same mindset, they don't want somebody telling them what to do, or they're tired of working so hard, or they're tired of working for someone else. All of a sudden, every problem that exists is now on them. They have to fund it, they have to figure it out, they have to process it, and they have to solve it. And so this is not something that is really even a natural state of being, because like the zebras, we want to run with the herd. A woman that works for me, Zenab, prior to going to college, she was in the United States Army. And she talked about that. And there's the idea of the rate buster. They didn't call it that, but the rate buster is the one that blows the curve for everybody. So if you're in a high school class and everybody's struggling with a test, but this person aces the test, then they blow the curve. In the Army, there's the rate buster. There's the person that's doing everything perfectly and doing extra credit and makes the other people look bad. So the people, they don't like the rate buster in the front of the pack because the person is literally too good and is drawing attention to everybody in the middle of the pack. And then they don't like the person at the bottom, which is dragging everything down and causing people to lose privileges and get punishment. And so the Army really, in that scenario, they want that unit to work together at a certain level. And I don't know how they feel about the rate buster in that situation. I've never been in that situation, but this is something that's prevalent with all of us, because we don't want to be famous, we don't want to stand out, we want to be safe, we want to be comfortable, and we want to basically be taken care of. So when you open the business, you throw all that away. You discard everything. whatever safety and security you had is gone. You're standing out there by yourself on some windy cliff with the weather getting bad, and it's up to you. You have to do everything. You have to make all the decisions. And there's really no stress like that, probably. Financial stress is terrible stress. Sickness and injury is bad, and it's certainly worse. But in some ways, then it's not your fault. And so I read a book one time where a guy had been in a head-on collision and nearly died and wasn't supposed to walk again, but he had also crashed a real estate portfolio or company the same way I did. And he talked about that. He said the being in the hospital and nearly dying and being, unable to walk was not as difficult for him as when all his real estate investments and business, everything crashed and he went broke, because he said the difference was in the real estate crash, I think he was in real estate, when he lost it all, there was nobody there. Whereas in the hospital, he was surrounded by people that were caring for him, and friends and family and medical staff, and he had this, small army unit there of people whose goal was to help him get well. And all he had to do was do what they told him to do and lay in bed, and they fed him and changed the sheets and did all that. He said, and thankfully I've never been through that myself, but he said, as bad as that was, as terrible as that was, it wasn't as bad as failing in business. And so the hard part, is the mental part. And if you're going to start a business, this is something that you're going to have to deal with. And if you already have a solo law firm, let's say you have a solo criminal defense law firm, and you're just kind of clicking along, and your revenues are what they are. You're not really trying to grow that. You're not really looking for ways to challenge yourself and go through these hard parts, then that's okay. Because, if you make what you make, and maybe you have a spouse that works, or maybe you've got, an inheritance or something like that, and you have your lifestyle, at a certain level, and that's all you want, there's certainly nothing wrong with that. The problem, I think, ultimately, though, is that when I think about other people I know who do that and don't challenge themselves and aren't willing to go through the emotional pain and stress that I've gone through, their life is more stressful for mine right now. Like they have less security, and they have more problems, they have more frustration than I do. And their problems are not as big as mine. My problems are much, much bigger than theirs. My financial problems are bigger. My financial challenges are bigger. My personnel issues are bigger. Everything that I do is a much bigger problem. But because I've gotten to where I am, finally it's gotten to where I have the resources and the ability, and most importantly, the people that solve those problems and help me solve them. And so I guide them and help them. And so really, I don't think that the person who isn't growing the business has less stress than me. They have a lot of uncertainty. They have a lot of problems. And that's something that, and you'd have to talk to them, but they're not necessarily better off. Nevertheless, if you really don't want to sign up for the stress and the problems, then it may be better to just work for somebody else. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. But if you want to start a business and you want to do something, then just know what you're going to go through. And I know that one time I was having a cash crunch, and I had, the money wasn't coming in, the money wasn't there. And so because I had had all these real estate failures, I wasn't exactly a great candidate to borrow money. And the banks that had loaned money to me in the past would not loan money to me. Nobody would give me a home equity line. Nobody would give me a credit line. And so it was kind of a disaster. And so luckily, online, I found some people that would give me a credit line. And I remember doing it, and I think I borrowed, I can't remember how much it was. It was $70,000 or $80,000, or it might have been a little less. And I think the interest rate on it was at least 35%. It may have been higher than that with some other upcharges. And so I went online, they checked everything, I had the money. Well, that money got me through the problem. Now, what I had to do, though, is I had to pay back, I think it was about $1,000 a week. So with this kind of loan structure, at that time I was such a bad credit risk that I had to have $1,000 a week deducted from my account. And I think that went, it was more than 52 weeks. I think it was probably, 12, 15, 16 months or something like that. I cannot remember. But whatever that was, and I remember my COO at the time, when she saw the loan and asked me what it was, I mean, she just looked at me like I was an idiot that I had borrowed that money. And I remember I was married at the time, and my wife at the time, she had the same reaction. And basically what I was getting from people and my wife had worked in the business prior to that, what I'm getting from people that I guess you could say are my peers or my advisors was basically, how stupid am I? You were so stupid. And this loan, you couldn't even pay it back early. The interest all came off the top. And so you just had to write it out. And at my COO at the time, started explaining interest expenses to me and how you shouldn't borrow money like that. And my wife at the time, the same thing. I'm getting these kind of lectures on how to manage money. And I'm thinking, no, you don't get it, because if I didn't do this business is gone. It's just gone. So I'm going to do what it takes. It doesn't matter. I know this is not a wise financial decision in that context, but I'm not going to do anything to stop. And I paid the loan back. It got me through it. It wasn't the end of my problems. It wasn't the end of my cash crunches. But I had the resolve and the determination to do it. And more and more I get to where I just don't listen to other people who don't have that. Now, if I'm talking to the percent of people that own a business and are doing better than me, yes, I want to talk to them. I want to hear them. I want their advice. But for everybody else, they're different. They're different from me. If you own a business, or you own a successful business, or you grow into that, you will be different too. So just something to think about. And I'll close on this. The other thing is, because it's so hard mentally and emotionally, if you don't love it, do something else. Because if you don't love it enough and are not passionate enough to stick with it, you'll stop. Because these things happen, they're unavoidable, and so find something you love. So thank you for joining me. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you next time.
If you want to know more, go to prosperatlaw.com we show criminal defense law firm owners how to reduce stress, have more free time, and make more money. Thanks for listening.